the Director of Government Affairs for the American Principles Project. Thanks for being here tonight, John.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
Great. So all those threats by progressives of packing the Supreme Court or putting term limits on justices may be coming to fruition after all. Do you think the timing of this commission is suspicious, given that it coincides with the push for sweeping gun control, amnesty, and other big-ticket items that Democrats, I guess, don't want the courts getting in the way of?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. You mentioned in your segment the intimidation. And someone like John Roberts, not exactly the most steadfast Supreme Court justice. He's a political animal. He's looking at this and saying, oh, gosh, I'm going to have to make sure that this is a moderate court so they don't come after us. And, Ilya Shapiro with the Cato Institute pointed out on this commission, 36 people, 3-to-1 ratio of them being progressives. These are academics largely, not political people. So, the deck is kind of stacked here. The goal of this commission is to build political support for stacking the Supreme Court. And this is what the Democrats want to do. They want to get rid of the filibuster. They want to, add D.C. as a state. They want to rig the game up and down, every branch of government.
And I think it's funny that we see repeated everywhere, especially when it comes to this commission that's now been announced today, that there's a 6-3 conservative majority. And as you and I were talking about with John Roberts, not so much there, but also, we've been let down by some of the other appointees, recent appointees like Kavanaugh and Gorsuch actually recently. It really seems like the only two conservatives reliable are Justices Clarence Thomas and Alito. Do you think that's the case? That really, it really just comes down to those two, especially with Justice Clarence Thomas just this week really giving sticking it to big tech.
Yeah, no conservative who follows these legal issues feels safe. We have, you mentioned Gorsuch. We had the Bostock ruling, a question about transgender rights. Can men, pretend to be women and have these civil rights? And Gorsuch, who is told by everyone, this is a guy who's an originalist. He's a textualist. He's going to be dependable. He went with them. And so we had a Supreme Court, a so-called conservative Supreme Court, ruling in favor of transgender rights. So, we definitely don't feel like we are safe on any of these cases. And again, what they're trying to do is stack the deck. They want to add 3, 5, 7 justices, and make sure that that it's rigged in their favor every time.
And broadening out this discussion, as we're talking about with Gorsuch and some of these rulings that we've seen recently from the Supreme Court, from what we're supposed to be, were at least sold to us as conservatives. Recently, we saw in Arkansas, I believe, with Governor Asa Hutchinson vetoing a bill. Of course, the state legislature has now overridden that veto, but vetoing a bill that bans and blocks doctors from either conducting or referring kids under the age of 18 from taking hormones or receiving sex change surgeries. What do you make of the whole situation going on there, especially given how it's coming on the heels of Governor Noem's decision in South Dakota?
Well, I think folks are learning really quickly, Republican politicians, that this is an issue that matters to the base. The base is not on board with 8-year-olds taking puberty blockers and 14-year-olds taking cross-sex hormones. And it's icky to talk about. A lot of these, Chamber of Commerce Republicans don't necessarily want to weigh in on these social issues. But when you have the left as radical as they are coming after our children, you don't have a choice. And so I'm really encouraged the reaction to Noem, the reaction to Hutchinson, that we're seeing, people like Tucker Carlson going, full on after him. I think it's encouraging, and hopefully we'll see, as these transgender issues come down the pike, more Republicans recognizing that they have to stand up against it.
And in that interview you referenced with Governor Hutchinson recently, he tried to, package his veto as limited government, that he was the one, as funny as it sounds, that he was the one being the principal conservative, even trying to invoke Ronald Reagan's name, for example. What do you make of that response?
It's just, unfortunately, I think they just are trying to come up with these talking points. But Ronald Reagan would not support sex changes for kids. It's just insane. Limited government is what we believe in, but there are rules for limited government. And that includes protecting children from experimental gender treatments that will sterilize them and ruin their lives. It's really easy. It's really simple. So, I think more Republicans need to recognize the influence of these corporate interests, that they're not in it with us. Corporate interests are representing the far left. They want to trans your kids. And so we have to stand up against them. And if Republicans aren't going to do that, step aside and let real Republicans, real conservatives lead.
And so do you think that corporate interests really played a role in Governor Hutchinson's decision to veto? As I said earlier, it has been overridden, but his initial decision, like we saw in South Dakota, do you think it was corporate interests that really kind of swayed their hand on this?
Well, to him, he's saying no. And, you'll have to take him at his word without proof. But I'll tell you, Walmart came out, the Walton Foundation, and they used his exact talking points, saying that we needed to protect limited government. Limited government. So apparently there's no role for government whatsoever. I guess we should stop enforcing laws against sex trafficking and all these things because we want to have an anarchist state. I mean, it's insane. And so I hope that he's not listening to corporate interests, but to future Republican leaders who are going to, face these types of things. We have Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's been great on so many issues. He will eventually be tested on a social issue like this, on an LGBT issue. Is he going to stand strong? Are these folks going to stand strong? They got to do it because this is where the base is at. This is the line in the sand, and we are drawing it.
And I was just reading recently as well that when it comes to, for example, these pharmaceutical companies, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars off of getting these young kids, usually kids who are already struggling with depression and other mental health disorders. Over 85, 90%, a lot of these kids who say that they're transgender as kids and teenagers grow out of it by the time they become young adults. But these big companies, Planned Parenthood is actually one of them. If they get these kids hooked on taking hormones and going through these different treatments, it's actually big money for these pharmaceutical companies. Is that also why we're seeing this social push from a lot of these companies, because they are benefiting from it monetarily?
Oh, of course. Something I think a lot of folks don't realize is that once you go through a sex change, you're not done. You still aren't the sex that you're pretending to be. So you have to take these hormones, and they cost $700-800 a month to stick on this regimen. And so, of course, the pharmaceutical industry is all about this. They're standing to make a killing here. And so, this is just something folks need to understand. The business interests are interested in doing this, and we have to push back against it.
And I saw something that you dropped on social media kind of hit like a bomb in some ways, but actually a former manager of President Trump's team, Brad Parscale, is said to be in talks with Caitlyn Jenner, who everyone may know better as Bruce Jenner, the athlete. If we're running for the governor of California, we're in the middle of this recall effort right now. Talk to me a little bit about that. It seems like this whole transgender issue, it's dividing conservatives all the way up to the top.
Well, unfortunately, it's a well-kept secret that the president had some advisors close to him that pushed him against these social issues. And so he didn't weigh in on them as much during 2020. Now we're seeing the president coming out. He's come out on women's sports in his CPAC speech. He just came out bashing Asa Hutchinson, said bye-bye Asa. So, there are these Republicans, I think, who kind of dream of an ideal where we're going to be on board with these social issues with the left and we can just do our low corporate tax rates and all that. That's not the Republican Party. It's not Trump's Republican Party. It's not MAGA. And the president has shown that that's not where he is. So I'm encouraged. And I think people need to hold those advisors to account.
And when it comes to President Trump's recent statement, as you were mentioning, he's also calling on a lot of conservatives to boycott a lot of these woke companies that hate us. Why are we still buying from companies that really do hate us? They fund all these measures to hurt us, to demonize us. Do you think this is one way that conservatives can take back some power, I guess, in the form of boycotts? I know the left has been very effective at using boycotts, the right not so much. Is that something maybe we can, I guess, work on, especially seeing how it's coming from all angles? Saturation of this woke ideology right now in our culture?
Well, it definitely needs to be twofold: boycotts and exerting state power against these companies. But I'll tell you, conservatives have always been averse to boycotting. We just kind of think, these are private companies. They can do what they want. We have to stop that. We have to stop that. I am the biggest sports fan in the world. I loved the NBA. I love Major League Baseball. I'm not watching either anymore. And the reason is because you can't support these leagues when they're pushing back against your country, right? We have to fight at some point. So I think the president's right to encourage these boycotts. And it's really easy to do. You just recognize that a company like Coca-Cola is working against your interests. Then buy a different soda. There's plenty of soda out there. Or, maybe it's healthier just to not drink soda at all. I know that's something I'm working on. So
great points there, John. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
And coming up next, the very same government who won't enforce laws against